Hi, and thank you for joining me for Love Your Work. I'm Whitney Wiley, and this is my opportunity to talk to people who love the work that they do, talk to them about their journey to getting to finding that work, and then some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. And today I have with me Brian Olds, who is the founder of the Black Speakers Network. How are you doing, Brian?
Hey, listen, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. And hello to the Dream Job and Career Connection crew. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. It is a pleasure to have you. And so let's start with where you are. You are a business owner. You run a business that is about networking, connecting people to their passions. So your passion is about helping people with their passions. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And so I'm one honored and thanks again for this opportunity. So my name is Brian Oles, as you mentioned. I'm the founder and president here at Black Speakers Network, where our mission is to equip, connect, and inspire the next generation of Black professional speakers. And so BSN, as we call it for short, if you get tired of saying Black Speakers Network. So BSN, we are a speaker empowerment resource community. We have over 11,000 current and aspiring professional speakers in our community. And we're there to help connect audience to or help connect our members into the audience that they're called to serve. I started the organization in 2016, but if you went 10 years before that, by the way, I'm joining you now from my hometown, Baltimore, Maryland, and I've been here ever since. And so when people ask, who is Brian Oles? Like, well, who are you? I normally say I'm the skinny introverted kid from Baltimore, and still in this neck of the woods. I ended up at Morgan State University. And so, 10 years before I started BSN, if you had been sitting in a small classroom next to me, you would have watched as I stood up, walked to the front of the room over at Morgan State University and prepared to give my very first speech in Toastmasters. And we can talk about that story if you like, but basically that's where it's all started. If you've been sitting in that first row, you would have certainly noticed my sweaty palms. You would have heard my shaking voice that was cracking under the weight of the pressure
Oh,
of
stop.
delivering that. All of this stuff was happening. True story. I almost walked out of the room, and eventually I made it through my first presentation. I
Okay, so stop right there. Stop right there.
Sure.
I was a Toastmaster. The very first speech is about you.
Mhm.
So, how
Icebreaker.
could you have a problem talking about you? You know you better than anybody knows you, right?
You would think so. You would think so. Up until the very moment before you are about to speak, you have this unwavering confidence that that is the case. However, and I still remember the name of the speech was called "My Family Dynasty." Like it was a speech about myself and my mom and my journey up to that point. So yes, it's a 4 to 6 minute speech. You would have thought it was a 30-minute keynote. Sweaty palms, shaking voice. I was pacing back and forth. Somebody, I don't know who did this, Whitney. Somebody left the room door open. So at one point, I almost walked out of the room because I was
You
pacing.
kidding me?
My friend, his name is Deepo Adesina, who got witnesses. He was in the back of the room trying to wave me back in like Southwest Airlines style. So this all happened, but I made it through the presentation. I didn't die. As you know, Toastmasters, we pretty much clap for everything. So like,
That is true. That
if you
is
bring
true.
your lunch to the meeting, you're getting a round of applause. And in addition to
Except
that,
for except for the people counting your ums and your uhs. I think it's pretty cool, right?
it's an amazing program. And I say all that to say that it was a great moment that punctuated my entry point into the speaking world. And that was, as you know, Toastmasters focused on the mastering the art of public speaking.
Right.
So getting clarity on your opening, your body, your conclusion, hand gestures, vocal variety, your ahs, your ums, your likes, your nos. So it's all about effective presentation. And then I later on learned that there's an entire industry behind professional speaking, which is where we play today.
And so, how did you get from the sweaty palms and almost running out of the room to a place where you are running a business, connecting 11,000 professionals to audiences. How does that happen?
11 years and a lot of time. Well, what's interesting is that I never, so my journey as I went out to discover this world of speaking led me to multiple organizations that support speakers. I'm the type of person where, I really love to learn through community. And so if I'm going to learn anything, whether it's a foreign language, I'm all into like Hamilton lately. So I'm watching like Hamilton on repeat. So when I'm learning something, I try to find other community of people who are doing it. And so,
Mhm.
there's a benefit of having somebody that's a little bit, more experienced, a little bit smarter than you. There's people to your left, to your right that you can learn from who are doing it in
Right.
real time. And if you really, I believe, my background, by the way, I left Morgan, went into corporate. I spent 11 years working. I'm a little bit of a atypical millennial. So I spent 11 years working for the same company before I exited and ran BSN full time. I've done finance, I've done training and development, diversity and inclusion work. And so, and when I was in training and development, I went back to school to study instructional design and adult learning because, in addition
Okay.
to training, I really wanted to make sure that I understood how adults learn and, the principles of how to effectively analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate training. And so, I believe that the best way, if you really want to test how well you know something, try teaching it to someone else. Teaching someone else is a great barometer to see how much mastery you have in a particular topic. And the best way to learn something is to teach it anyway from a retention perspective. So
Absolutely.
uh, I was seeking a community. And honestly, I was going around trying to find speaker community, and there were some. I was just disappointed with the lack of diversity, I should say. And so my objective, particularly coming from an HBCU, we bring a little bit of swag to everything. I was a young guy at the time and still am pretty young, but my goal was to find this community of other like the next generation of Black professional speakers. And so since I couldn't find one, I did the next best thing, which was to create one. And so I did, and my goal wasn't to set out to say, hey, I'm going to start a speaker organization. My goal was to be in community of other aspiring and emerging professional speakers. And so, like any entrepreneur, like everybody listening here, certainly in this community, the spark of starting a business, finding a need and filling it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean filling it perfectly. It just means identifying a gap in the marketplace and seeing what might be possible. And that's where we started in 2016.
Okay. And what was the origin? It was you and who? How did this actually get started? How many were you? How many of you were there?
Yeah, yeah. So I tried early on. It's really funny because we actually had 12, so it's very biblical. I remember going to a meeting and I was trying to pull in. By the way, I had a business before BSN. It was called Skills. So it stood for sharing knowledge and information for lifelong success. So to me, skills, I mean, we never made any money basically, but it was a great learning opportunity to really help me understand where I love to play in this space. And one of the interesting things that I realized in that process, we were running around hosting events. We were having like free seminars and workshops and basements of hospitals and stuff like that. And one of the things I realized in that process is that a lot of my community from Toastmasters, came over with me to Skills. And I had a friend of mine, Jonathan Pasley, who, challenged me. And he's like, hey, Brian, you have, because we were big ideas people. We would have all these different ideas and thoughts about how we're going to take over the world. He said, Brian, you have all these ideas. Your problem is, you never pull the trigger. Like you
Mm.
never execute anything you're talking about. And I was like, well, I'll show you, Jonathan Pasley, which I respected. Jonathan was 4 years younger than me, but he's already an entrepreneur. He started now a very successful internet marketing and website design company. And so I was like, okay, I just wanted to show him that I could, finish something. And so when I learned through that process of building skills, I started my own podcast. We started hosting events. We started creating opportunities and stages for speakers. And, I loved speaking. I progressed through Toastmasters and started getting very, very comfortable despite being an introvert. But the thing that I realized in that process is that I love speaking, but what I love more, and perhaps probably as much or probably more than speaking, is supporting other speakers and
Mhm.
helping them connect to the audience they're called to serve. And so that was really kind of the linchpin. And so when we got to BSN, I took that same audience. So it was like Toastmasters slash
Yeah.
HBCU, then to skills, and then I took that same group. But I did try the whole like, hey, let's lead by committee thing. And so the disciple of 12 sitting around the table, we were actually at Jonathan's office for those early meetings. And I would always leave those meetings feeling more confused than I was clear just on, because when you're starting any business, I mean, everybody's going to have their own opinion about
Right.
how things should work. And at the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision on what it's going to be. And so I remember going to my last meeting. We only met like a couple of times, but I went to the last meeting. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just start, because some people are like, you need to do a membership. You need to, sell courses. Why should we even be doing this anyway? So like, I just took all of that and said, you know what? I'm gonna just start. And so one night, but I was still working full time. I came home. I built the website. I created a Twitter page. I created a, Facebook group, which we still have today, the BSN community. And then, we were off and running. So I just made a decision just to start, and that was the beginning. So we're a single member LLC. Like, I'm the sole owner right now. Some of those people are kind of around. Some of them are members. Some are just supporters and friends. They all have their own businesses for the most part of that original group, which makes perfect sense because we were all kind of going in the same directions. But we've been able to support each other, and that's been an important thing.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. And I love that it is, while it's you, there's still this collaborative effort and a supporting and encouraging network that you have on a personal level, and that has grown from 12 to 11,000. That's pretty impressive in a 4 year span of time.
Yeah, I think that the personally, I don't really get a lot of satisfaction of doing things in a silo or by myself. I like learning from other people. I like being able to tap into the collective intelligence that emerges when you put some really, really smart people in a room, really creative people, people who have their own strength, their own background, and really just see what they're going to do. The other piece about our model that I think is our strength is that I just I'm very I think I'm very low ego type of person. So like, I don't always need to be in the spotlight. So actually, particularly, I mean, we can talk more about this, but my transition from corporate, especially those years where I was really heavily building a business and trying to keep my job at the same time, I actually kind of under indexed on how visible I was. If you were to go by my LinkedIn profile, BSN was a footnote. Now it's
Mhm,
all,
mhm.
president of BSN. But back then it was like you had to really be paying attention to know that I was building something else. And so I kind of pushed other thought leaders into the forefront as we were building. And by its very nature, we had to as well, because I think sometimes we feel like as entrepreneurs, we need to know everything and we need to be the
Right.
kind of go-to expert. In my particular case, I didn't care as long as the knowledge was coming into the community, as long as it was being infused. I knew that I could create an ecosystem where we got an expert photographer, we got a videographer, we got a website designer, we got a speech coach, we got a storytelling expert, we have all the individual components. And by the way, they are all building their own thing. And so partnership, systems, and communities are kind of the three pillars that I've have consistently focused on. And I think that's been, you know, a strong contributor to our, sustained growth.
I think that's awesome. And I was going to ask you about this, that the transition from corporate. So you're in a corporate space and you're doing BSN on the side hustle, or under the cover of darkness, or however you want to put it. And what was the deciding factor where you said, "This is where I'm going. I don't need this anymore," and not the financial place. Like a lot of people will say, "When I'm making X amount of dollars, then I can leave this other thing." Not that so much, but what was something that made you say, "Okay, now's the time. I've had enough of this and I'm ready to do BSM."
Well, one thing that I will say is that even in our infancy of BSN, when I was first starting out, with very little business model to speak of. I mean, our first product was a $5 digital download. And so, do the math on how many of those you got to sell like every day to get financially free. But I think, so yes, it wasn't a financial decision, it was an emotional decision. I started BSN with the intent of it being my exit strategy. And I think that's a very important distinction because we are in the gig economy. Like most of us, most people in 2020 and beyond have multiple streams of income, whether
Yeah,
you're delivering food, you're a massage therapist, like you watch kids, you like, edit video, whatever it is, like most of us have multiple skills that we can monetize. But there's a difference between having, being a side hustle pro and being an entrepreneur that's, building a business to scale with the intent to do it. And even now, once it's at this point, I still build my business in a way where my mindset is, what's the exit? Like what are we going to sell it one day? I don't personally desire to sell it, but you have to build it. I think something
right,
changes when you build it with that mentality. And
right,
so from the beginning, I was like, man, my days are numbered. Like every time I pull into that parking lot, I knew that, that was going to be a time where I'm going to pull off for the last time. Like I wasn't trying to get promoted. I was doing a great job, but I wasn't trying to get on like a leadership track. I wasn't trying to, volunteer for extra assignments. I was trying to do my work, do a great job, go home and, build BSN. And so the mindset for me was there from the beginning. It was built as an exit strategy.
okay,
The actual moment came about because, to your point, I did have this grand fantasy of kind of what, or at least a strategy in my mind from a financial perspective. I have a great financial planner. Like I'm not the type of person, like my risk tolerance isn't the type of person that would just like, oh, I just make a decision and figure it out tomorrow. Like, no, let's, have a plan. So my plan was to pay off all of my like debt, including student loans, like my car debt. I want to be debt free. I want to have 6 months expenses in the bank. I want to be making at least, I think between $5,000 and $7,000 of like revenue on a monthly basis. And I wanted to, just kind of make sure like everything else was taken care of, health insurance, all that stuff. Well, when I exited, I had none of that. I still had all student loans. I still have student loans. I'm not in a hurry to pay them off, but I have student loans. I just paid off my car last year. I drive a 2013 Nissan Altima. Just paid that off last year. Revenue is way up. We're well over six figures at this point. I left in April of 2019, but the decision came about because there was some things changing internally within the company. And it was almost like I believe everybody kind of knows when their window was there.
right,
So I knew as those things were happening, I had a decision. I was like, I could kind of weather the storm and see how these things go. But at that point, we had at least 18 months of, we've enjoyed 18 months of month over month increase in revenue. We run our business a membership model. So it's a very predictable income on top of all the other ways that we have figured out to monetize. And so it wasn't like, everybody always talks about, you take the leap of faith. Like For me, it wasn't really a leap of faith. It was like a calculated, like I'm gonna leap, and based on how strong my legs are and the wind factor and all these other things, I should be able to make it to the other side of that canyon unless something dramatic goes wrong. And even if it does go wrong, I'm wearing a parachute. So it wasn't like a leap of faith. It was more of a leap, a calculated leap, and it worked. There was some months where it was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't get health insurance until like the end of that last year, and so there's stuff that I could have gone back and did better. But at the end of the day, I have no regrets, and I don't think there's ever a perfect time to exit. I
Right.
just felt that the way things were going, there's an inherent opportunity cost associated with giving perhaps the best 8 to 10 hours a day to an employer. And at that point, I again been to the company 11 years, had done, a lot of great work with them. And I just said, hey, this is about as good as it's probably going to get. And, there's a bunch of other things I could be doing right now. And my code name for leaving was actually Tuesdays at 10, because Whitney, I had this whole thing of, like, a lot of people take long weekends. So it's easy to have a Friday off. It's easy
Right.
to have a Monday off. You can kind of have a long weekend. But if you're doing what you want to do on a Tuesday at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and for me, whether that's like a Target run or, chilling in Starbucks or on a conversation like this, that's the true definition of freedom. And that's what I wanted that Tuesday at 10. So
I love that. I love that. I didn't come up with a code name. I just called mine an extraction plan. I was just needed to go. And it doesn't sound like it was a situation where it was miserable or untenable for you. You were more focused on something that you really wanted to do. And I know a lot of people, particularly clients that I work with, are running from something. And your story sounds like more you were running towards something. And maybe there was a little, it's like, yeah, happening in the background, but this was more about you creating and running towards something that you felt really committed to.
yeah, I think that's true. I think most people are we either are building toward our dream, or we're trying to prevent the nightmare.
Yeah.
And for me, the nightmare was really being able or not being in the position to do certain things financially. I don't have any kids, I'm not married, and so wasn't looking at things from that perspective. But I have an aging mother that, consistently taken care of. And so, I didn't want to look back and be like, man, I not wasted, but
Yeah.
there's time that I could have been better spent across other areas of my life. I have this huge map in my room. It's one of those like scratch off maps, and so every country that you go to, you scratch it off,
Mhm.
and it turns into like a different color. And I only had one country like scratched off. And I was like, man, and that was from like study abroad in college. It was Spain. It was green. And so I wanted to scratch off more countries, and so there are all these things ahead of us, but we can get so complacent and just playing in this box.
Mhm.
And I think oftentimes, um, particularly when you're working for an organization, they're going to make things not it's never going to be paradise, but they're going to make it very attractive for you to stay there. Health insurance, bonuses, paid time off. They were paying part of the cell phone bill. You get a laptop, you get all these different things. And they are all blessings. Like, all of those things came into place. But at the end of the day, what you don't get is control. You don't get
Right.
flexibility, you don't get freedom, and you
And you
don't
don't
have
get Tuesday at 10.
at all. No, you get 10 p.m. Before you got to wake up the next day. So these are trade-offs. These are
Yeah.
trade-offs, and I think every entrepreneur has to kind of make a decision of what they want, what is the most value. Some people,
Yeah.
their highest value is money. Like, they have enjoyed a certain status of life, and they're not going to walk away from, you know, 100,000, 150,000, $200,000 and grind for 50,000, 60,000 and build their way back up. Me, I never had made more than $100,000 in my professional career. So it was very easy to walk away. Like, I mean, I'm, I don't care. Like, what's going to, like, what's, I mean, really, like, you know, the car is almost paid off. I mean, you can take the car if, you know, you really want to. Apartment, okay, I can move back home if I really, really absolutely needed to.
Right.
And then, you know, I may not be eating the best food, but I'm not going to starve. Like, what's going to like, what's
Right.
really going to happen? And
Right.
I think
Right.
we ask ourselves that question, you know, what's the worst case scenario? There are some bad scenarios, but like it's probably not as worse as we think it would be. And when you put yourself in a position where you have to figure out a way, typically your mind goes to work on problems that you give it. So, and
True.
you find
True.
solutions.
And what you said, a couple of things come to mind. And one is this thought of having a vision for what you want your life to look like, right? And your Tuesday at 10 is part of that vision. And mine's similar. It wasn't, clever enough to come up with Tuesdays at 10, but I'm thinking a laptop lifestyle, which means if I can work wherever I am so that I can travel. I don't have aspirations of seeing every country in the world or even lots of countries. I'm about islands. There are lots of places I'm not interested in going,
Big
but
time.
there are some islands, and as long as it has Wi-Fi, I'm good, right? I can write, I can coach or consult from just about anywhere. So I think that's really important. This notion of having a vision for what you want your life to look like. And then you mentioned, values, and living in alignment with those values is extremely important. So, you know, I'm I'm hearing you. I'm following this journey, and I'm wondering what are some of the early lessons that you learned when you made the transition from your corporate gig to running your business.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, the biggest thing is, you know, we again looking at my plan and then looking at the reality, there's this big mismatch. So you have to decide, okay, what am I comfortable with trading off there? And so lesson number one is you know, don't let perfection stand in the way of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Perfection is rarely captured in life and anything. And so you have to be willing to build a plane while you're flying it. And you know, from a business perspective, you're constantly in a learning and a growth mentality. You know, very few people have, I mean, even if you're in a situation where you're like a serial entrepreneur and you may be building your second, third, fourth company, there's still aspects about, you're still every single day you're learning new things about your market, your customer, technology, economic conditions are shifting, and you're learning things about yourself. And so for me, the biggest thing is, you know, not waiting to have 100% of the information to make a move. I mean, most of the time we got to move with 60 to 70% of the information. And even then, it may not even all be the best information. But, you know, if you sit there and wait, you know, you'll get left behind. And so, you know, not letting perfection stand in the way of progress is another big thing. The other piece is, you know, not being afraid to ask for help. And this is, I think, particularly important in folks that I kind of categorize as like solopreneurs, because we're used to being everything. I mean, we are the chief marketing officer, technology officer, CEO. We are, you know, customer service, we're sales, we're like uh,
Right.
admin support and everything else in between. And so, you know, when I first started BSN, yeah, I was grinding out in my bedroom doing everything myself. And now, you know, we have a team of over, you know, 10 people that are responsible for, you know, the day-to-day execution. We got a technical team. You know, I built my first website myself. Now we have a beautiful, robust, you know, website that, you know, a team has created. We have a video editing team. We have a creative director. We have two virtual assistants, a project manager. So these are things where it's kind of like, you can only take your business yourself so far, and then it's and again, this is kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about always build your business as if you're building it to sell it. You have to be thinking about like what is your talent strategy, and your talent strategy doesn't have to be this massive org chart, but it's gonna be like, hey, I need a virtual assistant. Like
Right.
once you start getting some things in place and you're like, wow, you're spending 8 hours a day doing something that somebody else could do for $10 an hour. Let's document that process, off it offload it to somebody else, and so you could start to focus more so on the things that only you can do. Like nobody else could sell your vision, nobody else could talk to
Right.
customers, nobody else could deliver presentations, and then everybody else, other people can help support you. And so learning how to ask for help, and that's the same thing with the progress or perfection. Like you may not be able to hire people for, we still don't have any full-time employees. Like everybody that we work with are independent contractors, and so looking for what makes the most sense based on your needs is very, very important. And so these are all early lessons. And I think the last thing is, just like in life, where you don't want to be keeping up with the Joneses and all this stuff. I think we're kind of in like the social media age where people think entrepreneurship is cool, and it is cool,
Hmm.
but the lifestyle of an entrepreneur, or that laptop lifestyle that you mentioned, it unless it depends on your business model and depends on what you're doing, but for the most part, it's not all beaches and sand like every single day. Like you gotta there's a lot of work involved in terms of, if you don't do it, it's probably not going to get done. So like the work ethic, I think, is just something that people tend to underestimate.
Right.
And I like what I think Tony Robbins said, like most people, underestimate, uh, or they overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years.
Yeah.
So the execution gap is something that we really need to pay attention to. And for me, um, I, I love building sustainable. Like I'm never, my overall philosophy isn't let me be the first out there. Like let me, I don't need to be the fastest. In fact, it's almost to a detriment. My superpower, I think, Whitney, is like patience. Like
Mm.
I will outwait you. Like I don't care. Like whoever it is, like you will be dead before I'm done. Like I can wait. Like I'm fine. Like I'm not in a rush. And so that freedom gives me an opportunity to sit back and kind of look at things. And when it comes to work ethic and stuff like that, it's like, hey, I don't need to, launch this product just to,
Hmm.
try to
Just
make,
to say that you did, right?
yeah, or
Yeah.
try to do a cash grab or whatever. Like I prefer to build once and build slowly versus trying to do that. So those are my big three things. Like I think everybody needs to kind of figure it out for themselves, but you don't want to be this person that's seduced by what this entrepreneur, you
Right.
see this person doing on Facebook, this person's flexing on Instagram, somebody else just bought, like, paid for a car in cash. Like your bank account says no, you're not paying for a car in cash. You're gonna and save, you're gonna save some of this, you're gonna save 30%, you're gonna reinvest some of this money, you're gonna make sure a lot of people try to pull cash out of their business so quickly, and they actually end up starving their dream. And so
Right.
lots of lessons, probably don't have time to go to all of them, but generally speaking, those are like my top that come to mind.
So I'm interested in knowing when you made the transition sort of from solopreneur, you started this and you were doing everything and started delegating, hiring contractors to do things. What was your biggest challenge as someone who was letting go? Right? You've got a vision, you've been doing things, you know that if you do it, it gets done, even if it wasn't done the best way it could have done in the history of life, but you knew it got done. What was the challenge in letting go and becoming a leader rather than just the business owner.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'm still working on. Like, we had an email go out early, and I was like, "Oh, that's a typo," but I mean, here's the thing: like, unless you're working in like national security or healthcare, like if you make a mistake, somebody's going to die. Like
Right.
very few of us are working in that. Like nobody's going to die because we put a typo like in an email. So to me, it's a thing of you to along the theme of Tuesdays at 10. I wanted to create a business, not create another job. It's very
Right.
easy to create another
Right.
job. So to me, my peace of mind and everything that you just said comes down to one thing, and that's processes. The process gives you peace. And so
Mm,
when we think about processes, what do we have? Well, we have some sort of, written documentation. And oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're like, oh, I just need help. Well, what do you actually need help with? Or we actually had this conversation. We're having this conversation in our BSN Facebook group right now as you're talking. People are like, my phone is like going crazy because somebody is like, how much should you pay for a VA? I'm like, I don't know. What do you want them to do? Like, what do you really want them to do? Because somebody that's doing like data entry for you, or like lead generation, or calendar management, that's a lot different than somebody that's really doing copywriting or some of these other things. And so how specialized is that specific skill, and what do you actually need them to do? Do you have your own processes documented?
right.
And that's kind of the beginning point of getting help, because the first thing somebody's going to ask for is, hey, we need a step-by-step instruction. And so my big principle in business, in addition to the don't let perfection stand in the way of progress, is we need to slow down and speed up. And so, again, going back to the patience, some people
Hmm.
just aren't willing to slow down to um, how in NASCAR, or I know very little about NASCAR, but I know enough to know that when you're in a race, those cars are going like 150, 180 miles an hour around the loop, but they have to eventually slow down and come to the pit area.
Right.
And they get the new wheels, they get an oil change or whatever. If you just keep going around and round and round and round the loop, eventually, like, your engine's gonna blow, you're gonna bust a tire, like something's gonna
Right.
happen.
Right.
So you have to have time that you build in. Everything doesn't have to be go, 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 go. And so that's the big thing. And so for me, it was the piece came from the process. Like, even if, and again, the process doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I would love to have this beautiful SOP that's like color coded and written out with bullet points and if then statements and all these other things. But guess what it's going to be today? We're going to get on Zoom. We're going to record these steps. We're going to screen share it. Then we're going to document it and then put it together later. You just have to start somewhere. And
Right.
so I think that's the biggest thing. And finding people that are not just the cheapest, like the waist to the bottom, like, oh, I got somebody $4 an hour working for me, from Somalia, is might look nice on a balance sheet, but this person doesn't understand your business. They're not going to provide
Right.
constructive feedback. They're not going to they're not really going to be a team member. They're just going to do exactly what you tell them. And so you really want to have somebody that's like looking out for your best interests. All of our team members are like that. I'm really slow to fire, like, was it slow, fast to hire, slow to fire, whatever that thing is, that's what we're doing.
Fire fast. Slow
Yeah,
to hire, fire fast.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Whichever way it goes. I hear you. I hear you. Uh, so, do you have any? We're going to be wrapping up. Do you have any parting words that you'd like to share? Whether it's lessons that you learned or just some words of wisdom that have gotten you to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dr. George Fraser, one of my mentors, particularly since we're talking about love your work. He said that ideas are good, but systems are better.
Mm,
Um, ideas are good, but systems are better. And so it's easy to have an idea. Like ideas are free. Like people have ideas all day long. You find ideas on Google, and people are seem to be overly particularly in this age of like intellectual property and stuff like that, people seem to over index on the value of a great idea. Buy Black is an idea,
Right.
but creating a marketplace where Black business can come and facilitate the exchange of goods and services, and an exchange where you could connect with people, that's a system. And so I would say, if we could do anything, particularly this year with COVID and everything that's been hampering entrepreneurs from a growth perspective, I would say, you know, you know, focus on the system. What is the most effective way that you could consistently deliver value, to your customer? And the less that it involves you is probably the better. The more you can get that into a technology, a written process, another person, or some type of repeatable tool, the better. Because honestly, we are in the age, we're still in the gig economy age, but we're definitely in the age of customers have just as much information as you do most of the
Right.
time. They
Right.
have just as much, they have very little patience, and they need, help. And so it's like, if you're going to separate yourself from everybody else, forget about the great ideas, focus on super serving your customers. And one of the best ways to super serve your customers is to, have your systems and your process for doing that in a tight, repeatable way that you can consistently deliver value, whether you're the one delivering it or not. And so I would say that's the biggest thing we try to focus here on in BSN. And that's what we're going to continue to do until we help as many speakers as we can.
There you go. And excellent, excellent wisdom. Great. Just, I think everything that you've described on your journey, and I know there have been bumps along the road and all of that, but it seems like the path that you've chosen and the patience probably pays off in that respect, quite a bit for you in the growth of your business is is awesome. And I think you've laid out an example in a model that others can follow. So, Brian, if anyone wanted to get in contact with you about BSN or speaking, learning to speak, or anything like that, how could they do that?
Yeah. So if they want to reach me, probably LinkedIn is the best way
Okay.
because, um, yeah, it's just I'll respond to messages and stuff like that. For BSN, we have a Facebook group. So it's if you type in Black Speakers Network in the search, you'll find our community, and just join there. It's free. They get a free copy of the ebook as well. And so that's where we do training on a weekly basis. We have thousands of people that are constantly asking questions, sharing best practices. So I think that's the easiest way for folks to stay connected. And
Okay.
then obviously, if anything that the community needs, specifically, just drop a comment down here. I know we're live right now. I see folks in here, sharing and stuff like that. So I see Darlene. So if you have questions, they could leave them down here in this thread, and I'll be happy to answer those as well.
And if they wanted to join BSN directly,
Yeah, so they can join BSN. We are on wait list right now for new members, and so we are probably going to be opening up membership toward the latter part of this month, early December. And so, depending on when you see this, it might already be open. Again, going back to systems, like we're in slow down to speed up mode, and so really really excited about some of the new programs. We got Black Speakers University. We got a new podcast directory. We have Black Speakers News, 24-hour news website, as well as some other features that we just added. And so to enhance the onboarding process, when folks apply for membership, they can learn more about that at blackspeakersnetwork.com. They can actually get onto the wait list if you like. And then once that opens up, they'll get an email with the invitation to apply to learn more. But anybody interested in membership, we'd love to have you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we will put Brian's contact information, the Facebook page, the BSN website, all of that will be in the post, either in the post or in the comments, so that you can avail yourself of that information. So Brian, thank you so much for making the time to come in and chat with us, to share a little bit about your journey and the lessons that you've learned along the way. And I'm happy to know that you love what you're doing, and that, absent probably, who knows, I don't know what, didn't sound like um, that while you have an exit strategy or working on an exit strategy, doesn't sound like you'll be like pulling the ripcord on that. But if you do, I probably will be watching you Tuesdays at 10 on some island somewhere, right?
You are welcome to come on anytime with me.
Cool. So thanks for stopping by.
No, thank you.
All right. Take care.